Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. The death of 66 children in the Gambia linked to cough syrups manufactured by an Indian firm has spurred the government to launch an urgent probe into the matter. Samples of the cough syrups being blamed for the deaths have been sent for testing. This after the World Health Organization raised an alert linking the deaths in the Gambia to the 4 cough syrups made by Haryana-based Maiden Pharmaceuticals. The global health body says, as per initial lab analysis, each of the 4 cough syrups contain unacceptable amounts of diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol, considered to be poisonous compounds. Although the exact one-to-one causal relation of death has not been provided by the UN Health Agency, India has sought the report on the establishment of a causal relation to the deaths with the medical products in question, also photographs of labels and products, etc., which will help in further investigation and action. So while the probe is on, the incident has certainly put the spotlight once again on quality monitoring and due diligence by pharma companies and also the need for stricter regulations. To discuss these aspects, I'm joined on the program today by an eminent panel of experts. So let me begin by introducing them to you. Pleased to welcome on this edition of Perspective, Dr. Raman Ganga Khedkar, Dr. C.G. Pandit, National Chair, ICMR, Dr. Sanjay Singh, Director and CEO, Genova Biopharmaceuticals Limited, and Dr. M.C. Mishra, former Director, AIMS. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the program today on Sansad TV. Dr. Mishra, let me begin the program today with you. You know, while the probe is on, the shocking incident has, of course, brought a dent to India as well and its image, because we are globally known as the pharmacy of the world today. Share your thoughts on, what perhaps could have led to this incident. The WHO says perhaps the presence of 2 compounds is what perhaps could have led to these deaths. Tell us about what these compounds are, how dangerous they are. Is their mere presence fatal, or were they used in extraordinary amounts which led to these incidents?
Thank you so much for keeping this debate. It's extremely important for us as consumers and also as a Indian national, Indian citizen, because it definitely dents our image nationally and internationally. And since India is we call and we take pride in it that it's a pharma capital of the world, and such reports coming definitely sadden all of us. Then I'll come diethyl glycol and ethyl glycol. Both are not usual constituent of any syrup, cough syrup for that matter. Now, what plausible explanation, if at all, they have been found? Because what I learned that they have done some analysis of some samples. Out of that, the quantity of these compounds has been detected higher than accepted toxic effects of these. Both are toxic, and these are used in paint industry and other industry. They are not normally used. However, glycerin, which is used as a sweetener in cough syrups, could have been contaminated with these chemicals. That is possible if they were contaminated. Now, that source of that glycerin has to be investigated. Plus, we also have to see whether all 60 children were healthy and then took this cough syrup in the quantities that would kill them by acute kidney injury or affecting their nervous system. It looks little too much, because cough syrups are sold in billions every day in the whole world, and they are consumed. They are over-the-counter cough syrups are available. So to say that it has happened, all these children have died because of acute kidney injury, because of the consumption of diethyl glycol and ethyl glycol in the cough syrup, it seems little too much to accept. Therefore, WHO also has to have detailed investigation in this matter. Naturally, when 60 children dying, WHO came in and they found that all these children were using. Why these children were using cough syrup? Were they all sick for some reason? That's why the cough syrup was being used. Did they actually die of cough syrup, or there were other illnesses in these children because of that they died? I think it calls for a very detailed investigation before blaming only the cough syrup consumption for deaths. And I think Government of India, instead of being defensive on this and say no, they were only this cough syrup was manufactured to export to Gambia, I think that is also not correct. I think if these cough syrups are safe, they can be used anywhere. They should be used in India also.
That's
They
right.
can be used
That's a fair
in Gambia
point
and
that a detailed investigation has to be carried out at all levels before, blaming. But Dr. Singh, the fact that this is not a one-off incident, the presence of DEG has caused several fatal incidents, even in India, where, innocents have lost their lives. How come these substances, which are toxic in nature, which can be fatal, are being used? Help us and our viewers understand what happens during production when glycerin is used as a sweetener in cough syrups. Is there no testing done to check whether they're contaminated or not?
For a normal understanding in industry, when we use raw material, those raw material has to be qualified. And where all these parameters has to be checked in, and when the finished product is ready, we have to again qualify these important parameters, and based on that, the drug product is released in the market. Certainly, this is a very unfortunate incident if so many children has died, but as Professor said, it has needed a detailed investigation, and certainly the samples which have been shipped to Gambia for control sample must be available with the firm, and they have to be analyzed, and based on the results we can make a decision. One thing, that whether this toxic material was present in the samples and how it has gone. But globally, often you find that like nitrosamine is present in certain of the drug, which is acceptable up to a limit, but beyond a limit it becomes toxic, it becomes carcinogenic. Just like ranitidine, top of the companies in the world have been asked to recall through US FDA because the quantity was more than desired. So this is a check and balance system in the pharmaceutical industry because it directly connects with the human life, has to be maintained, and at present, without having confirmed data locally, globally, quantity, it is quite premature to go ahead and say this. This may be correct, this may not be correct, as Professor Misa said again. So there is a standard parameter has been defined, standard formulation has been defined, standard testing has been defined, control sample has to be defined. So yes, Government of India, our regulators have started, but I will say as a common citizen, it has to be done at a bullet speed and results has to be out to ensure where is the problem. Is the problem is related with the medicine or the problem is also somewhere else?
That's right. Dr. Ganga Kedkar, so when we talk about problems, where do you see the lapses? Is it at the production stage? Is it at the quality control level? Or is it the fact that we do not have enough regulations in place? Where are the loopholes because of which incidents like these happen? And perhaps this is an incident that directly impacts the image of India in a sector where we have seen exponential growth in the last few years.
No, I agree. Now, if I was to answer this question, first thing I have to assume that there is a relationship between those deaths and consumption of this cough expectorant, which is yet to be proven. Now, if there are lapses that could occur, if you assume that you're going to think in terms of that pharmaceutical company, it is possible that they did not go for quality checks. They had to ensure that the levels of these diethylene glycol or ethylene glycol are below the minimum standards that have been prescribed to be used there. Which means there has been some kind of a failure that could have had occurred at the pharmaceutical company's level. Second thing, could this be a spurious drug which has a malintention? Perhaps I don't think we can ever think in terms of ascribing a malified intention to the same unless we have evidence for the same. Now, third thing which we must understand it also speaks about certain regulatory changes that we may have to bring about. Now, when generic drugs are being produced, one of the things that happens is for first 4 years, when a new drug is introduced, only up to five companies are expected to approach DCGI, the Drug Controller General of India, and get their approval after rigorous. They have to do clinical trials, they have to show bioequivalence and everything before DCGI, before they get approval. But once 4 years have passed, what happens is a state FDA unit is empowered to give permission to manufacture, market, even the license can be provided by the state FDA unit. Now we need to ensure that that liaison between those two, the quality control mechanisms, the inspections that you require to make to those sites which actually need an inspection every 3 years, but we don't know whether that happens. We need to have a good supervisory kind of a mechanism that must be established even within the country. What we must also understand is DCGI does not have so much of manpower to look at everything that tends to happen. I think empowering state FDAs is going to be an important issue which we may have to take up after this particular episode, because it dents the image that we have globally. The fourth thing, what does it tell? It also tells us that this country, Gambia, perhaps does not have good regulatory kind of mechanisms. It is time that we have to train all these countries, which are less developed countries. They need to have a good regulator before they accept those drugs coming to their own countries per se, which perhaps is lacking. If you actually read the report, and if one infers from the same, you will realize that there were 66 deaths that have occurred, and only then the whole thing has surfaced. The root cause analysis perhaps has showed that it may be attributed to the cough mixture, which means there were slow responses that came. We did not know about the details of the same at this point in time. Today, if you look at even Gambia, they are going for door-to-door campaign showing the picture of this particular cough syrup and not to take it, which essentially means regulatory structure at the other countries' level also needs to be strengthened.
That's
What
true.
is also important and perhaps more painful for us to think about is when WHO directly went to allege that this particular association is true and it was the Maiden Pharma which has produced this particular drug and the consumption has led to deaths, and they are unable to share those findings with us. They should do it quickly. Before going to the press, people need to understand one thing. On one hand, we say India is pharmacy for the drugs, and suppose you have a maligned image of this country, you will find that there would be drug shortages that would come across in all less developed countries per se. So some kind of caution was also required. We need to have a better coordinated approach between WHO and Government of India.
Certainly, I
so
completely
that
agree with you.
such
And
things do
before
not
I go across to Dr. Mishra on the need for regulatory changes and what he thinks are some of the changes that can be brought about at the initial level, Dr. Singh, if I may come back to you to understand what really is the procedure when we're talking about drugs that we are only exporting. So, for example, when we talk about these 4 cough syrups, what we know so far is that none of these cough syrups are for domestic use. It's not being sold in India, it's only been exported. So, are we, overlooking some of the regulation procedure when we are exporting medicines? Or we do not have a strengthened mechanism to actually keep in check the kind of medicines that we are sending abroad?
So first thing I would like to say that the pharma industry is India, one of the sunshine sector. Here we have a big challenge in terms of regulation, in terms of producer both. On one hand, we have to produce the medicine which has to be affordable. But on the other hand, we also have to ensure before affordability, safety. So there are 3 terms which are important for a drug. It has to be safe, it has to be efficacious, and it has to be affordable. affordable is the third point which comes into the point. So this is a very challenging situation because many countries cannot afford drugs which are available at a very high price. So this is challenge number one for the industry. The challenge number two, which comes for the regulator, the kind of our business has grown in last 2 decades, whether our regulatory capacity has increased in the similar way or not. I feel that we need to increase our regulatory capacity and capability to next tenfold to understand this process. The third thing, which question you asked, now I'm answering. Either whether we are exporting or we are for our consumptions or it is for any specific need, rules and regulations are same. You cannot change the rules and regulation because all the way it is going for human consumption. So there is nothing like this, but because our government and our regulatory system has oversight, they are responsible, they get the license for export or for domestic use. So all the regulations are in place. It is not that if we are for export purpose, so government, our regulatory agency will not touch. Our regulatory agency has all the powers and rules and regulations are exactly same. Only some export-oriented units are formed. SEZ, where we only export. We have some tax injunction and those kind of things. But it has nothing to deal with the quality of the product and the regulation of the product. This is my answer.
Dr. Singh, another aspect, and because it concerns the Maiden Pharmaceuticals, which is the company in question, what we also understand so far is that it's not the first time that the company has come under the dock. There have been several states which have banned some of medicines manufactured by this company. It's also come under some kind of controversy over the last couple of years. Why then is it still allowed to manufacture when it's not been, on quality control, it's been sort of banned by certain states like Bihar, like Kerala. There have been certain cases wherein some medicines have not been found suitable. So when a company which comes under the dock for quality reasons and when it involves matters of life and death, why are those companies still allowed to operate?
I do not have the details that what has been seen in those companies before or after, but if some investigation comes into the picture of regulator take a decision, put a corrective measures into it, and possible that another the slippage is possible if the company is not driven by high quality. This is possible. But this is regulator purview that, and they will certainly, these questions need to be answered by them, because it is not possible for any company to manufacture any drug which is substandard. And again, one of the points which has been put forward by Professor Misra and Dr. Ganga Khetkar, yes, there is a possible parallel, a small percentage of globally, if you check globally, a small percentage of medicines are supplied which are spurious. I do not know what is the current one, but there was a time which was in almost in double digits, the percentage of spurious medicine. So at present, whether this is part of the spurious medicine or whether this is lackness of the quality control at the industry level, our investigating agency will figure it out very soon, but also has to be very thoroughly has to be screened. If this company has done something in the past wrong, what are the action has been taken? Because those data is not in front of me. I cannot comment on it.
That's right. So investigation currently is underway, Dr. Mishra, but the fact that if there are lapses found, there should be some kind of a deterrent message to all of these pharma companies who may be, involved in such kind of spurious drug menace. That is, that we've seen. There have been several incidents within the country, and now it's also hit abroad, which dents our image. So coming back to the question on regulations, Dr. Ganga Khetkar cited some shortcomings within our regulatory system. Do you think we need to strengthen them in terms of infrastructure, in terms of manpower, and in terms of quality checks before we allow these medicines to travel abroad?
Absolutely. There is no doubt that these good manufacturing practice, GMP, these need to be in place with each and every manufacturer, and very strict quality control with drugs. There cannot be any room for any lapse whatsoever. And that is where the challenge lies for the drug controller also, and other state FDA, as Mr. Singh has mentioned, and more so when you are exporting some medicine, because whenever now look this cough syrup, it may be responsible, it may not be responsible for these deaths, but it has dented our image already. The press conference, the news has traveled all across. We don't know what is behind this press coverage without confirming whether how many children had consumed this cough syrup. Were the 60 only had consumed, but 600 had consumed, or 6,000 had consumed, and these 60 children were already sick with some illness. So the detailed, and what I would say through your Sansad TV, that Government of India and Drug Controller General of India must form a committee immediately, send it to Gambia, collect those samples, bring the samples from there and analyze them for themselves to ascertain whether whatever is being alleged, is it really a fact? And if it is fact, then such manufacturing units must be dealt with severely, with severe punishment, not only their closure, but also severe punishment to their manufacturer, whosoever is behind it. If it was a lapse, deliberate lapse, and if it is a contaminant in the glycerin, that also we should see the source of that glycerin. Was it China? Was it somewhere else? Because today, if you look at, even today, most of the raw material for pharma industry comes from China. It is because it's more cost effective for most pharma industry. And that is where we are trying that our dependence on China is lowered in terms of this raw material. We manufacture our own raw material, but these lapses cannot be pardoned in any manner and to any extent. And this must be dealt with very severely. And I would say, if I were the decision maker, I would send my team to Gambia and cooperate with Gambian government, and also for our own knowledge, our own information, we should do that testing of these samples, not leave it to only Gambia. They may not be having, as Dr. Ganga Khetkar was saying, regulatory mechanism in these countries also, and maybe we can help them with that also and strengthen our regulatory mechanisms as well as quality control issues, because in drug manufacturing, quality is the key and quality will be the king when we say that. And we boast that we are the pharma capital of the world, then we have this responsibility also.
Absolutely, you're right, because we have to live up to the expectation of not just being the country that provides affordable drugs to the world, but also quality drugs. So this is where we have to, we have built a credibility, Dr. Ganga Khetkar. We have to live to it. How can we ensure that such incidents do not happen in future? You mentioned we need to strengthen our regulatory mechanisms. Besides that, how do we ensure, multiple checks and balances at the level of quality control? Also, when we are checking the raw materials before, using them in the final product, before we are exporting the final product to countries. So at different levels, quality controls have to be, done so that such incidents do not happen in future. What do you reckon for that?
I think each one of us has to become responsible and play their own key roles. Whether it is industry, the industry has to feel the responsibility that the product that they are going to provide, is something which would be of quality. We take pride on certain issues, because we supply most of our drugs also to the highly regulated markets. You will read many a times in, let's say, a couple of months' time, you will read that few drugs have been voluntarily recalled, which means our industry standards are also so high that if they detect something, they are willing to take back that drug. They may have had mistake, there could have been something which came out as an impurity. That all those things are also set as standards here. Now we have to ensure that every pharma perhaps follows the similar standards, which essentially means audits of the industry are going to be required. We may perhaps have to think in terms of a modified approach, because those audits may not necessarily be audits that DCGI or state FDA can do given the manpower that they have. perhaps we may have to have accredited agencies who could be doing regular kind of audits and finding out any faults in manufacturing. That's something which is extremely critical. On regulatory side, I think it is also important that we need to change, which we have already discussed at length in this particular discussion. And it is also important that people should also be quality conscious. Drugs are meant to save lives and not to kill. If we accept this fundamental principle, perhaps if we work together and find out solutions to overcome the problem that we are currently facing, I'm sure that other industries which are not even supplying to highly regulated markets will also set a benchmark of high standards across
That's right.
our Indian pharma
Dr. Singh, I'll
manufacturing.
take one last word from you. This is an industry that holds moral responsibility because it involves lives and deaths. As a mother, I would be really worried if I have to go buy a cough syrup and some complication develops. It is something that erodes the trust of the pharma companies. We trust doctors, we trust our drug makers, and this is one responsibility that the pharma industry has to shoulder. Maybe they have to look beyond the profits and the business aspect as well. So how do you ensure that this trust continues of the common people on the pharma industry and incidents like these do not happen again?
I'm a practicing scientist and opened a company. And the biggest motto for me is in the company as a CEO that the medicine which we produce at Genoa can be given to my son, my father, my mother, my own ones. And if this principle has to be followed and highly qualified people has to be employed in the industry, or they have to be trained to do this kind of job. And I assure you, these are some sporadic incidents has happened. It is very sorry situation which has happened, but I am telling you, I'm so proud of this industry from the country. Cipla, one of the company who saved thousands and thousands and thousands of lives in Africa by making retrovirals. We saved life. This is our job to do this. We are here for life. We are here to take away the misery. These kind of incidents which has happened, they are very painful. They have to be investigated to the last. And if the mistake has been found, they have to be punished. If the company has done its thing, our regulatory agency has lagged, they have not checked it, or some other factor has come, like spurious drug, or these children were having some combination which has culminated into it, including syrup. It has to be investigated. But I assure you, the quality of medicine we make in the country are of highest grade, and we qualify for all over the world, not only the limited position, because
That's right. So
we
India
don't
today
differentiate between India, developing country, or anywhere else. These are all humans, and this is our duty and service to do it.
That's right, Dr. Singh. So India today has, over the years, built that credibility. Today, it's providing medicines to at least 200 countries across the world. And that's a credibility that we have to live up to. Any kind of such incident should not dent that image, which has taken several years to build up. So we hope that the kind of assurance that you're giving, and if there are any lapses on part of the pharmaceutical company that's in question, so perhaps some kind of strong action is taken by the government so that such incidents are not repeated. And it's a deterrent for other pharma companies as well in the future. So that having been said, I'll have to wind up the program. Thank you to all three of you for joining us on this edition of Perspective, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. Thank you very much once again for joining us on the program today. Viewers, thank you for your time as well. So that's it from us on the program. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Until then, you take good care of yourselves and keep watching Sansad TV.